I'm going to talk to you now about back safety when we're lifting. Now, first and foremost, the way that I coach is for safety when lifting, and that is because I have over 2.5 decades actively competing in this sport, suffered many injuries. I've learnt the hard way. I've learnt from making mistakes myself, getting injured, and then having to relearn key positions to be safe and more efficient. The good thing is, if you want to be most efficient biomechanically, then the two go hand in hand. Safety and efficiency go really well together. The way that I now coach, I believe, is the most efficient way of lifting a bar from the floor overhead. But more importantly, it is, I also believe, the safest way. Now, this is coming from many years of experience, and I want to spend a few minutes now sharing some of the key positions where your back is likely to be in a vulnerable position. Let's take a look at the start position, for example. In the start position, we often hear coaches coach to open up the chest, stick the bum out, and as a result, we often end up with an arch in our lower back. Let's compare that arched position to what I would encourage, which is a more neutral position. If you sit on a chair with your bum just on the edge of the chair, knees and hips at 90 degrees, and sit up as tall as you can, lengthening through the spine. Gently tummy in off waistband, and from here we pivot at the hip and lower to what would be the start position. This is now a neutral back. Compare that position to a hyperextended position where the lower back is arched. That same principle applies when lifting from hang. If we lower into a hang position, it's very common to see a lifter arch in the lower back with the chest very high and the bum sticking out, and the lower back is predisposed to injury. Compare that to a lifter that lowers to a neutral position with their back straighter. In order to maintain that straight, that neutral position, we need to have good core awareness. And by core, I'm talking about trans abs, lower abdominal muscles, and glutes. Now, for the purpose of this recording, I'm keeping things as simple as possible. So if you are a physiotherapist or a well-qualified medical expert, I'm keeping this simple intentionally. Now let's look at another key position. When we are in, for example, a jerk position, with the bar up overhead, it's very common for the lower back to arch. Now, my position the way I would encourage you to lift is that when the bar is overhead, the hands are directly, or the bar is directly above the shoulders, shoulders directly above hips, and hips tucked in underneath to keep the lower back nice and neutral, nice and straight. Compare that position to a lifter that has a slightly straighter back leg, no glute awareness. They're likely to find themselves in a hyperextended position, risking lower back injury. Imagine for a minute the vertebrae. We've got bone, disc, bone, stacked one on top of the other. That's what makes your spine. Now let me use a different analogy. Let's look at a biscuit and marshmallows. If we go biscuit, marshmallow, biscuit, marshmallow, biscuit, marshmallow. Now, with that tower of biscuits and marshmallow, that's your spine. If we compress from the top down, we're going to get a nice even squish through all the marshmallows. Everything's going to squish evenly. If, however, we put pressure on one side, which would be replicating what would happen if the lower back was in an arched position, then we're going to end up with discs being at risk of injury. Imagine my hand arched backwards, that's your lower back, where my knuckles are, and you compress, that's going to really exacerbate the pressure on the discs, and that's when we risk injury. So it's very important, in my view, to make sure that the lower back is in a neutral position throughout snatches, cleans, and jerks. Another common area where lifters find themselves predisposed to injury because the lower back has hyperextended is at the top of the second phase of the lift. So the point when you are at your highest or your most fully extended before dropping under. It's very common when you watch a lifter from the side to see that they finish in this position here. And that is often caused because a lifter is trying to lift the bar higher. They're trying to shrug it and pull it to get that bar a little bit higher before dropping under. As a result, they end up in a forced hyperextended position, risking injury to the lower back. Rather than coaching a shrug and a pull, one of the big reasons that I moved away from that many years ago to loose arms is so that we can really generate the power from our quads and glutes. We hit a powerful extension where the lower back is nice and neutral, nice and straight, and the body is as tall as possible. This, in my view, should be your finishing position, your fully extended position, not here. This is a lower position. My head is lower now than if I were here. The other reason lifters end up in a hyperextended position is often because of lack of glute activation. If they're just relying on quads, which, hands up, that's how I used to lift many years ago, and that's one of the reasons why I was predisposed to a back injury. Without glute activation, you're relying on quads and lower back to get the bar up. I want you to be able to not rely on the back, and I want you to be relying on quads and glutes to generate maximum power. Think about it. If your force goes down, the way I'm trying to explain it, driving down into the ground there and finishing nice and straight, equal and opposites, the bar's going to come up. And more importantly, it's going to stay nice and close to the body. As soon as your shoulders go backwards into that vulnerable hyperextended position, if the shoulders have gone backwards, my hips will compensate by going forwards. And that's exactly where the bar's going to go. The bar will then loop overhead into position. So not only are we risking injury, we're also less efficient technically. There are my views on why or how we should maintain a neutral back when lifting, and that's something for you now to go away and consider and think about how you're lifting. If you find that you are in a hyperextended position, if you find that you are not activating glutes most effectively to put you in the right positions, then check out my 14-day glute activation program. You can access it via my website, powerposition.co.uk, and just go to the courses tab, and there you'll be able to sign up. It's free, it's there for you to help minimize the risk of injury.